Welcome everyone. We're closing out Q1 and now we have the last Wednesday live of this season. Nils, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much, Alex. It's delightful to be here. Can't wait. I was getting all dancy with that music and the countdown.
I really love dancing to it. I mean, people just tuning out thinking, what's this dancing? What's this music? So I'm not going to play it again, maybe later. But yeah, we're going to be seeing what we come up with, kind of music for our ears in terms of, product sales. Who should we blame when you're not hitting quota? As you say, product. Let's see what people make of it. So yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So Nils, maybe you want to actually before you introduce yourself, because I remember we met actually through LinkedIn. It was for a mutual connection, and
That's
I
right.
about one of the books you wrote because I was writing a book at the time and it's being edited, and I asked for your input. Then you attended one of my events, and we just had this back and forth. And yeah, you just have so much wisdom and knowledge. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself for the people watching?
Sure. So I've been an enterprise software product manager for a long time, like more than 25 years. I started like a lot of product managers did, particularly back in those days, accidentally. I just kind of got moved into it and had to figure out a lot on my own. And that's actually why I wrote the book, The Secret Product Manager Handbook. It was a handbook that I did not have as a product manager when I was getting started. That was the root of it. But in the mid 2000s, I was the product manager on a product that was for product managers. It was very valuable. If I loved using it, our customers loved it, but we actually never figured out how to sell it right. And after that product, there were other reasons that the company ended. There were some other bad decisions that were unrelated to my product, but I really wanted to figure out why we were not successful. What had we done wrong? Mm-hmm. And that was sort of, I had been like an okay product manager up to that point. I had a lot of good skills for product management, but I was clearly missing something because we hadn't made this transition. So I looked back and I looked forward. And I did a lot of research to try to figure out what was going on. And that's sort of where the thinking that led to this claim that I make, which is that if sales isn't making quota, it's probably product management's fault. That's where it arose. Because I figured out what were all the pieces that what were the things that should have been there that weren't, and or were they there, but they just weren't communicated well, or the picture wasn't put together as a complete puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive into that. I'm sure a lot of sales people will be relieved. I thank God, it's not that I'm a poor salesperson. It's product's fault, they're not. Something is happening. There's a disconnect. And actually, first I just want to challenge that because, again, let's look at the size of companies, different segments and industries, because in a smaller startup where it could even be the founders developed an app, for example, they're usually quite a techie guy. They develop the product, and maybe then they start outsourcing some of the development, or they keep it in house. But whatever. When it's a smaller company, is there that? Then that's kind of a question of you blaming yourself, because then there's how do you manage that disconnect if there even is one? Because I can imagine in a larger company, product teams, sales teams, customer success marketing, they're all sat in different places in the office. I've seen that, four corners in the office, all sat differently. No one's talking to one another on Slack or wherever. But a smaller company, is that really the case still?
Well, so the problem with a smaller company, particularly where the founder is a technologist and does the building, is that it may be a great idea, this thing and there may be a problem that they actually experienced, that they're solving with their problem, but they may not be very good at articulating the problem part of it. Technologists, we tend to like the technology, so we love talking about the capabilities and the features and the functions. But prospects are not good at making the leap from, here's this capability to here's how it solves the problem that I have personally. And so that's where one of the big breakdowns is. And my belief is that part of our job as product managers is to go out and discover these problems that need to be solved and to understand them from the perspective of the prospect, of the person suffering from the problem. What is the actual pain? What's the personal pain? What is the frustration? What are the what does it mean to a prospect when their existing way of solving a problem results in errors or it takes a lot of time, right? What is the impact on them? For example, maybe they don't get to their kid's baseball game because they spend 8 hours working on the TPS reports, right? And so when I have a solution, I don't want to just say, well, I now have a much better solution for your TPS reports. I want to say, first, when I'm qualifying or doing discovery with the prospect, I want to say, do you make it to your kids' baseball games? Do you have a challenge like that? Well, our existing customers had that same challenge, and then when they got our thing, they no longer miss their kids' baseball games.
Exactly.
Can I set up a demo on Tuesday to show you how we did that?
Exactly.
Right. Instead of saying, well, let me show you how we do the TPS reports, nobody, that's not that interesting. It's like, you're going to save all this time because you no longer have to do them.
Exactly. It's like really cutting through the ice, I mean, the ice, and that ice is like people are afraid of getting from product to personal. That's it. They focus on the product capabilities, click past features, and they don't care. But they care about the kids' baseball games. That's it. Right. And it's maybe there's a bit of fear that's stopping people. I know, but I think it's great to go down into that personal level. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of opportunities that are missed, and part of it is we're all in high tech, right? We tend to mistrust emotions and emotional things, but the fact is that people sell. Well, successful salespeople know how to tap into those.
Oh yeah.
But they also need the guidance on how to do that, and people make that buying decision emotionally as well, and then they justify it with rationality. That's typical.
It's not in the head; it's in the heart, and that's the re-education process.
It's really a combination, right? And so, a good salesperson knows how to do that, but the breakdown often is, and I assume that all salespeople or most salespeople are competent at doing sales, and if they're failing at doing sales, that means they're either trying to sell something that nobody wants, which is a totally separate problem, or they're not selling the thing that people do want in a way that enables those people to know that, yeah, this is the thing I want. And that's where I feel the breakdown often is, right? So if, for example, if I have and this is a real example, I worked for a company that had a project management solution for small and mid-sized companies. But we didn't really train the salespeople very well, at least until I got there, that who was the real target segment and what were the things they were really suffering from that made them different and made our tool a great solution for them. So the salespeople knew we're selling project management, so they were trying to compete against Microsoft Project in their pitches, and they sort of had to make things up. Whereas once we told them, hey, small and medium businesses, they have X numbers of projects, they have X number of project managers, and they're probably really suffering from a particular thing, which was something we did very well, right? Resource allocation for projects. And if you could discover that in the discovery call with a prospect, we were much, much more likely to win that deal. And then we also had our demo set up so that we could demo how great this was compared to what they were currently using. And we turned around from missing quota to hitting quota every quarter.
Good. And that's it. It's like turning it around from, I guess, like the outcome orientation to discovery. And it's really getting this holy trinity right. I call it the holy trinity of sales. You've got to get your messaging, you've got to get your offer, and you've got to get the right leads. Those three things, messaging, offer, and leads. And they're all to your point, what you were saying, they are all interconnected, The leads, basically the prospects, the people are going to buy from you. You have to understand what messages resonate with them to present the right offer from front of them. And we can go back and forth on which of these
my mental picture of the ideal sales funnel is that it's a cylinder, and it's not very wide, but everybody that goes in comes out the bottom as a customer, right? That means every lead is a good qualified lead, right? And then you have, and it's very slippery too, because so you can get them through it fast. That's the perfect sales funnel.
Perfect. But is that realistic? Is that realistic?
It may not be realistic, but I think a lot of people think, well, let me just widen the funnel. But that then gets a lot of people that are not qualified in, and those people are costly. They can and particularly if there's way more of them than the people that really are qualified, that becomes a very costly process to disqualify them out. And many people will say, well, they need project management. But again, if Microsoft Project is a good solution for them, we're not, and we have to qualify them out, but we might still try to close them because we don't have enough of the right ones, and so on and so forth, right? So the goal is a cylindrical sales funnel. And obviously you can't ever get there, but you want it to be narrow at the top, but wide at the bottom and very slippery in the middle.
Yeah, I love that. Narrow at the top, wide at the bottom, slippery in the middle. And it speaks to something that I read recently. There's two winners in every single sales process. It's the salesperson who gets the deal, gets the client, and the one who backs out before they spend too much time on it. You know, the one who's like, you know what, can disqualify them and spend the time on those who are going to bring the right business in, the qualified ones.
It's great if you can, as a salesperson, think, if I'm disqualifying somebody out of the funnel, that's a win for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
As long as marketing is giving you enough leads, right? That you will, enough good leads.
Yeah, let's speak in a second. Let's speak to the marketing circle of ads. First, we want to say hello. We've got Shelly over here commenting.
Hey, Shelly. Hal, nice to see you.
Anyone who wants to comment, like ask Neil me a question, like Hal or Shelly, just write a comment below, and then we're going to be here for the next like 40 minutes or so, maybe. So yeah, then we'll answer the questions. Until then, I'm going to throw out questions of my own about the marketing. Because you've got leads, marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads. Ideally, we should only be getting the right ones, and I guess this is where product marketing and sales, they all need to be speaking with one another.
That's exactly right. So that's the first place where, again, this product management knowledge that we have, because we went out and talked to prospects, we learned what their problems were, we learned the symptoms. We've also talked to our successful customers, hopefully, and we've learned from them, right? No matter how we got them, we want to go talk to them and say, okay, I'm so happy you're successful. Tell me about what life was like before you had our product. That's the really important question. And then we can learn from them, and we want to get into the pain. What were you frustrated? Were you unhappy? Were you getting blamed for things, et cetera, right? All these things that are sort of personal. And then we got all that information, maybe in conjunction with marketing, ideally. And then marketing then says, okay, let me find a bunch of people who have these same symptoms, because I know that for people that have those symptoms, we have a solution that will make their lives much better. And so that's who you want your marketing programs to target, so that the right people come into your funnel.
You're right. I think it's not really just that first personal problem we have, because you can get from them, the before story. What was life like before? As you said, what's it like now? What that change was. But sometimes, again, for customers, they're willing to be honest with you. You have that trust with them. But what I found, and my clients have also found, is that prospects, it sometimes takes a lot of digging. The first call, they're not willing to open up, and then they eventually reveal more and more and more, the more they trust you. So yeah, what would you say to that, to change your approach from because most sales people, they just want to go for a quick sales cycle, velocity, get them through the pipeline. But stepping back and letting the time take care of itself.
So I think this also is related to the idea that you always have to ask a follow-up question, right? The answer to, no matter how well-intentioned the prospect is, or whoever you're asking, no matter how well-intentioned they are, the first answer is going to be surface level.
Yeah, it will.
And so you always have to go and say, oh, tell me more, or, and then what, right? I love those. Those are my two favorite continuation questions, right? Or, how did that make you feel is actually also a good one. Now, as you say, you might not get a good response on the first call. You may have to have established some trust. And how do you do that? Well, maybe with a customer success story. You just, like if you can get some facts about the prospect, we have this tool, we have to integrate them, and that's one of our challenges. So that's not just facts. The prospect can say that. And then you can say, oh, okay, well, we have some customers that have had that same thing, and they used our product and they're really happy with it. One of the things that they were talking about was the side effect of this challenge was that they never got to see their kids' baseball games because they were spending so much time on this. Are you experiencing that? And then they can say yes. And then or no, if they're not suffering from that, they might not be a good prospect at that point. But if they are, then you can follow up with saying, oh, well, how does that make you feel? What would it be like if you didn't have that time, spending all that time there? So then you start to ask, and that's going to be where the art of the salesperson is going to come in, how you open the people up.
Yeah, it is.
But you want to get to that situation where they're like, I'm really frustrated with this. It's really annoying. My boss thinks I'm an idiot. That's a really good one. Does your boss think you're an idiot? You can't ask that, obviously. But it's a great answer to get. How does your, how you're perceived in this company based on the fact that you have to use this very convoluted process
Well,
to
no,
get
I've
this
had
done.
some people come to me before saying my boss does, my boss does a joke, or my boss does this, and my boss does that. I think like to the art of storytelling, and before we think about like what story we're going to throw out there, you can't just throw out a story for the sake of it. Be like, once upon a time, and they think, why are you telling me a story? It's really figuring out, discerning alignment, as in, where are they at now? What do they want? What are they suffering from, and what do they need as the outcome? And then when you can like answer those kind of questions, those four core of storytelling, then you can throw in a very brief, customer-focused story. It's like, what? It'll be like, John, so-and-so was feeling the exact same way as you. Here's what they did, and here's where they are now. And then you can ask them a question about that, pivot back to them. Right?
I'd actually recommend bringing the story sooner.
Oh, you think so?
To open up the emotional side, because if you've got some facts, but you don't know how they feel, or they're not willing to talk about how they feel about the facts, then you can use a story about a customer that had the same facts and their feelings. And then you can check to see if the prospect has those same feelings or similar.
Yeah, it could be worth checking the line.
And then, and the goal is, in fact, I think you can even bring it further forward than that. You can bring it into the marketing. Like the marketing could say, are you not getting to your kids' baseball games because you spent 8 hours every Thursday building the TPS reports?
Yeah, no, to an extent, I agree. I guess the problem will be like, if you tell the wrong story at the wrong time, then they'll be thinking to themselves, not really so sure about. Example, like if it's a financially conservative company, this is where we need to do our research. Financially conservative companies,
sure,
they want to hear a story about cost reduction. People are like touchy-feely people company. They want to hear a story about, their employees, how good they feel, their retention, that kind of stuff. So it's really about like the research beforehand. And I suppose would be the BDR. You reckon who needs to be responsible for that, or the salespeople? Do you think this is where product can get involved, or not? What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's an interesting point, right? So if it's an unemotional company or an unemotional person within a company, then it can be more challenging. But then you maybe start the thing about it is, so if you're selling to finance people, your successful customers are finance people, right? And so you're going to get from them what excites them about the solution and what the transformation meant to them. And you can then reflect that back again, still with the prospect. It's not like you're going to sell this. Typically, you're not selling the same thing to somebody who's to like a marketing person,
that's true,
and then a finance person. Because I mean, for one thing, I mean, you certainly could sell the same product to both those people, but you probably have a different funnel for those.
Yeah, it'd be different fun,
You would market to the marketing people differently from how you marketed to the finance people.
You would think so, but I've seen enough companies out there who don't.
Yeah, but that's because they're trying to sell to everybody.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And if you're trying to sell to everybody, you're selling to nobody. And so you can't have these pointed stories unless you've actually grown big enough that, legitimately, I have these 5 segments who use my product. They're all different in this way, but I have stories for each segment that when I figure out where they are, it's one of the many, many reasons why, back to a really old idea from Jeffrey Moore, in Crossing the Chasm, the bowling pin strategy, right? You knock out one little segment that's very constrained, super in need, right? That's the whole point of them, is that it's not that the point is not that you're going after a small segment. It's you're going after a small segment who really, really needs what you have. And so selling them is relatively easy because they all have the same problem. You know that it's very tough on them. And then if you've hit multiple pins, then you probably have stories for each of those pins at that point. But if you start out with one story and you try to go after multiple pins with that story, you're going to fail with 9 out of 10 of them. And then that's where you're in that I don't have a repeatable sales model situation.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people, early stage maybe stumble at that point. But if you niche down to that really, it's somewhat hyper specific. I think maybe people are too afraid of that in the beginning to really niche down, so they do try to sell everything to everyone.
Yeah.
But I mean, that really works, is finding the exact segment of the market. Obviously not going too niche where there's only like 10 people in the world, unless it's something where you are literally so good you can charge at high
unless
price.
you can get $1 million for it. Sure. I mean, that's reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is stuff that a lot of people talk about, is like really going hyper specific, because there's just a random thing I just want, time management software. Now imagine if you sell time management software, you can maybe make $5 for an app, but if you do time management software for, I know, like middle-aged banking professionals who are struggling with X, Y, and Z, a very specific problem, then you can charge them maybe like $2,000. Add on to that the personalized coaching program, this and that, a group. Then you can charge premium rates. But you have to know that they suffer from that problem. This all gets really psychological when we look at the problem, especially in storytelling. I love the psychology of storytelling and emotions. But let's look at psychology internally in the company, because Hal asked a really interesting question. He said, salespeople, they change the meaning of qualified to build up their numbers. At least that's what he thinks. Is this and this may be an issue for management. So we were talking earlier about that funnel, about, what is qualified? What is, I think this is something that companies really, it's often the point that companies maybe overlook the question of, what is a qualified lead? We have lead, qualified lead, and this isn't up to the sales people, this is really up to management,
Well, so as a product manager, I have a relatively simple definition. A qualified lead is someone who has the problem that we solve, and has the money and interest in solving it. And so oftentimes, so how do you tell that, right? Well, first of all, you do this inquiry that we talked about in the discovery. Do you have this problem? Do you have these symptoms? Blah, blah, blah. The other thing you have to ask is, what have you tried before to solve this problem? Right? And if they say, well, we haven't tried anything, or or you say, what's wrong with your current solution? And they say, oh, that's fine. We don't really, it doesn't take us that long. Then they're disqualified at that point, right? They don't, because they're not going to be motivated to buy.
Change.
But if they say, well, we tried to build our own solution to this and it really failed, and then we had to go back to our spreadsheets, and now we're back in this terrible hole, they're qualified. I mean, obviously, there's a little bit of a fantasy world that they're going to give you that exact answer that you want, that says, oh, I've got your solution, get out your checkbook, we're gonna be there. But you also at that point are going to find out, we tried your competitor, and not only did it not work, but the pain of getting it installed was horrible. And now I don't even trust. Not only do I not trust that your solution works, I don't trust that your solution can be implemented by my team, because the change management may be too high. And then you have to have another customer story, or maybe part of the same customer story, that says, not only did this customer not believe it, was burned by the same competitor, but when they implemented us, it was much easier, and they were very happy with the change management process, right? So you need stories to handle. There's really, like, if you think about from the prospect's perspective, there's a bunch of risks. One of the risks is that your solution is not going to actually solve their problem, and you don't want to have to tell them, I guarantee it. You want to say, this other customer over here had the same problem as you, and they're super happy. Let me show you how they did that. And and the other risk is, well, okay, fine, it might work, but you can't install it at our place because we just are too complicated. And you want to then say, have a customer story that says, we had a customer that had the same concern about it, and we were able to get them on board, and let me talk to you about how that went. Or you can talk to them. And then a third one is, what was the other? I had another example in mind. A competitor. Your competitor has this feature that we think we really need, and you don't have it. And so I'm really leaning toward your competitor. You need to have a story about that. Well, we had a customer had the same thinking, and now they say they don't even think about that other feature anymore. They're super happy. Would you like me to show you how they did that, or can I have you talk to them? Something like that. Having these customer stories of successes that address the objections. I mean, obviously, it may be that early on you don't have all these stories, and so then it becomes a challenge to handle them. But you can do some things even in that case, like you can say, well, we know that this is going to be a concern for you. Let me show you what we've done to minimize that, right? So you can just say, well, we've got a technical solution, or you can say, we have thought about that, and you can sort of make a fake customer story. You have to be clear that it's not real, but this sort of says, our intention is that when customers do it, here's how it works. Something like that.
Here's how it's going to work. I mean, this is where I think that making it like the value-based sales approach comes across. some salespeople may be scared of the objection and the no, but the more advanced ones, the people who've been at it for a long time, they know objections are a great way to deliver value. I love it when people throw objections at me, because then it's like, boom, here's how we can react and pivot to that. And to do that, basically having that file prepared beforehand, like it could be called a story file, which sometimes like implemented people on an Excel sheet, other companies implement it on HighSpot, or something else where we already know, okay, the competitors, like they've been looking at this vendor, this vendor, this vendor is already prepared ahead of time. When you have the marketing team on board, the product team on board, they can prepare those value statements that BDRs or A's or whoever is selling can then quickly acknowledge and pivot. For that, there's also for that to happen, you need to preempt those objections. This can be done at any stage. Even though when you start up, you can write out a list of like, what do I think my prospect will say that it's too expensive, or not the right time, we're already using this or that. Make a list, the thing that you expect them to hear. And if you have those prospect conversations, get someone to go through the call recording. Every objection is a chance to flip it.
That's right. That's totally right. And the danger is when the salesperson has to make up an answer to handle an objection, and because they're going to usually get it wrong, because they're not the experts. Product is the experts, in some sense. And so we want to make sure that we prep them with the objections that they're going to get and how to address them. And as you say, pre-handling those is often really good, because I think about a lot of what we do in persuasion is we manage the subconscious of the person we're talking to. And our goal is to not let the subconscious of the person we're talking to get annoyed with us or start to hate us, because it has two modes, right? Subconscious, it loves us or it hates us. And by pre-handling objections, you keep them on the it loves us side, because a lot of objections are never voiced. They never have them. They just sort of like, well, he didn't talk about change management, so I'm just going to hate him and go to the next vendor, right? And so you need to pre-handle that, because they're not going to ask.
I mean, in terms of pre-handling that, sometimes, do you think it helps to address it up front? I know someone like Chris Voss, who was an FBI hostage negotiation expert, he talked about the accusations audit. Have you ever heard of that?
When
this is all the objections, and you're probably thinking this, this, and this, and he reels it out. What do you think of that? It's dangerous.
I feel like Chris Voss, if you want to know how to be a better product manager in terms of enabling sales, read that book. Never Split the Difference, right, by Chris Voss. Because when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly the same. I mean, he articulates it better than me probably, but I have made all those same points in various articles and posts and things, which is, pre-handling objections is an incredible way to do persuasion. It keeps them on your side the whole time, because if you don't pre-handle them, again, they don't necessarily ask the question or raise the objection. They just are frustrated if you don't address it. And it's not even at a conscious level. It's at a subconscious level.
Yeah, exactly. And to get down from that, like, because the conscious is what we see, hear, feel. And it's so stuck in our own heads. This is what I guess people do, is like, get out of your head, like stuck in your head, you're dead. Reach out a hand, you're grand, And for that, it's like kind of stopping the thinking process of like, it's great to have a process of like, here's how we're going to do the qualification discovery demo, but that's the kind of point where actually you just like stop the thinking for a moment and go down to that subconscious level, which is actually easier said than done. But how to do it, just simply be with the person in front of you like a human being and sense what's going on in the room, whether it's a Zoom room or in person. Be like, I'm sensing, I'm sensing like this or that going on. You can see if they're excited, you can see if they want to go ahead. You can feel it, really feel it, instead of going through your script and this kind of stuff. It's like, this is what I'm sensing. Like, and then just pausing for a moment and then opening them up, letting them open up, asking questions.
That's right, and I think that is one of the things that I would expect a salesperson a skill that I would expect them to have. Read the room, what's going on, and then have an appropriate response to fix whatever that problem is, if it's fixable. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, this is not good. We're never going to go anywhere. That may be sometimes the answer, but I've been on lots of those calls where the person on the other end of the call doesn't say anything, and this was before I sort of figured out a lot of this stuff. And it's like, you got to do something about it. You've got to open them up, and usually what was happening there is we were showing them a bunch of features of our product instead of first of all making sure we understood their problem, and then saying, oh, this is how we solve this thing that you talked about. And then being able to ask, how do you feel about what I just showed you? Because then they can't help but answer that at that point.
Exactly.
I mean, much more than saying, if you're showing them features, to say, can you see how you will use these features to solve your problem? We don't want them to make that inference. We want to make it for them.
Yeah, it reminds me of that company where I've done enablement training. I train people in demo, and we let them come with themselves. But so, like, sometimes when you see people just do the demo, it's like this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature. And they sort of maybe ask a question, and it's like, and I'll role play. I'll be like, yeah, it's okay, and then I'll be like, okay, we want this feature. I'm like, hang on, I don't say that to them at the time. I say that in the feedback, but after just what would you have said to this question? The answer that I gave is really like speaking more to the prospect than the product.
Yes.
Yeah.
I worked with some sales engineers once, and I watched their demo, and throughout the demo they said, well, let me show you how we do this. Let me show you how we do this. And I said, stop saying we, start saying you. And that was a major change. Just started focusing on the prospect. And I also said, you need to know what their problem is. You need to do some discovery before. And if your sales has not done discovery or has not given you have to do it at the beginning of the demo yourself. What is the problem that you're trying to solve here? How have you tried to solve it?
Cool. Yeah, right. I just want to ask one more question around the objections, the pain points. So from now, I want to ask. We're going to go to a little bit about how we can get product to communicate with sales. But before that, how asked another question. He's saying like the objection that people is really them, the prospect. They're calling out the previous pain points. They're seeking the solution. It's kind of like reminding the sales people.
For sure. It's. I mean, I think again, if your prospect, the ideal prospect has tried something else, spent money on it, and failed, but still needs a solution and is still willing to spend money, right? And so it's really valuable to know why it failed, so you can say why your solution will not fail in that same way. So I think that goes exactly to what Hal just mentioned.
Exactly. I mean, why would they be on the call if they aren't willing to spend money? It's just a question of like, what's stopping them? And you can't really ask that question. Like, what's stopping you from giving us your money? Obviously,
yeah, right.
But it's like finding through that, like weaving that through in a sophisticated way, we can say, to help them, to be of service to them. Yeah, because and this is it. Like the people in product, going back to that, that there is at least we hope it's a kick-ass product. We were speaking earlier. If you've got 5 customers, you said 5 customers minimum, then you should be able to sell it, right?
My rule of thumb is you have to have 5 successful customers who are using the product in the same way, okay. and you're trying to sell to people that have the same problems that those people have, right? So it's not like, I have these 5 successful customers, but I'm trying to sell it for a different problem. That wouldn't work. But I mean, and 5 is a rule of thumb, right? It could be maybe you need 10. And you need to have those stories as well. You need to sort of know, why those customers are successful, what the transformation was. So there's a lot of work involved in coming to that point.
Yeah, of course, that's often the difficulty. And would you say that those 5 customers, successful customers, who have the same problem, doesn't matter if they're like in a different, market segment, niche, geography? Example, like let's just say, what happened at Highball, they're very successful, and I've seen other companies very successful in one market, like EMEA, for example, or maybe APAC, Asia. Then they go into the US, they struggle.
Sure. Well, because almost nothing is actually the same, even if it sounds the same. Like the sales process, selling in Asia, very different from selling in America.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can, then the next step then is to make a mapping, right? But that's a future problem in some sense for what we're talking about, right? To get to that repeatable sales model.
Yeah.
But if you can make a repeatable sales model selling a sales tool in Asia, there's a chance you could sell that in the States. Of course, you got a lot of competition.
Yeah, exactly.
But you also have to look at it and say, well, what is common about selling in Asia versus selling in America? And I bet my guess is there's not that many commonalities. It's probably a really tough transition. Right. Whereas I could see maybe project management might actually be a better match between, project management in Japan, something that works for Japan might possibly work in some industries in America. But even that, there's going to be a huge amount of cultural stuff built in that you're going to have to create a mapping for.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a feature set, but like when you have the customers on the product, I guess when we see where things could get misaligned, we said new segments could be a cultural thing, there could be anything,
Sure.
but like, let's say it's in the same market, let's just focus on that for now. Got 5 successful customers, and then they, it's the growing, like how to go from like 5 to 10, then 10 to 20 or something like that, and so on and so on. And then the company gets bigger, then there tends to be, this kind of, I suppose, split. And you can even see it happen in the office. Product over here, sales over here. No one is talking to each other.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes you need to go back to basics on that, or you need to re-engineer it. Assuming you've got to the point where, I can actually make quota on a consistent basis, at least for a while. Let's say we get to that point, and then the quota starts to come down again. We start to miss again. What do we do then? Well, one thing we have to look at is, are we, where's the breakdown? Are we getting leads that aren't qualified? Do we have salespeople that actually didn't get the original training that we gave them about what the value proposition is and what the customer stories are? Do we have a competitor that's actually come in and started to do something? And there, a lot of what I talk about is, how do you increase sales or improve sales without making changes to the product, right? Because it's expensive to make changes to the product, and oftentimes it's not needed if you have successful customers, but you can't sell it. It often means that it's a marketing and sales issue, the root cause being product management not communicating well. But there also is comes to a point where, competitors do have more features than we do, and we have to respond, right? So that's another dynamic, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of an example there.
But even then, it's like, okay, if I'm as a product manager going to create some new features to handle a competitive gap, I need to be able to explain and give the sales team tools to understand, first of all, that we're addressing the gap, that why our solution to that gap is better than the competitors, why our customers are really happy with our solution versus the thing that the competitor has, stuff like that. So we still have to have all that continual communication, so that sales is always able to talk about the things that we really do have. They don't have to make anything up, and they also don't leave anything on the table.
Yeah, you're right. And like to the point where it's like an internal thing, because I'll address the external in a second, so we'll leave that over there off screen for now. But the internal thing, 3 Ps in there could be, the pipeline, could be the product, could be the process, of course, being the sales process, also the breakdown between product and sales. And like one tool that I know is very useful for my clients is like the pains gain map. It's basically when you get feedback, you get sales, get someone to go through the sales call, use Gong or something else to come through what problems, what pains, get that. People map it, take it from the CRM, send it over, and you can just do this on a Google sheet, specific pain point, person consequence, business consequence of that. You can get someone else that can probably do a 5x5 map of it. It's simple, but people don't do that,
Yeah. And I have a really simple model that I call, it's a mental model, but it actually means it's a bunch of specific things you should do. I call it the minimum viable product knowledge. So MVPK, right? And so it's things that a lot of times we put lip service around, but oftentimes they're not done, right? So what is the value? It's 4 pieces. The value proposition is one. And when I say the value proposition, I don't just mean why it's a good idea, but why is it better than competitors? Who's it specifically for in terms of a market segment? Well, actually, market segment's the second thing. Who is a specific market segment that needs our solution more than anybody else? Because then marketing can then create programs that target those people. Marketing has the tools oftentimes to be very specific in who it targets. And if they're getting people into the funnel who aren't in that target market, they can improve it. Or if they're missing people that are in the target market, then they can improve it. But if they don't know what that target is, and if it's not really explicit, they have a hard time knowing who to get. And that is often a breakdown, right? Again, going back to the project management tool, right? If marketing hasn't been informed directly of this is the size, company size, number of projects, blah, 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 they're going to get way too many people because everybody needs project management, but only a small number of people need the project management that we sell. Then there's kind of product specific objection handling guides, and a lot of that is customer stories. And then another big part of it is the discovery questions, right? So how does discovery and qualification, right? What should sales ask to qualify a prospect to make sure they fit that segment? And it's more than just segment questions. It's really like, what's your experience? How are you experiencing this problem? What are the symptoms? And then discovery is related to that. They're sort of the same set of questions in some sense. Are you having this problem? How are you experiencing it? So discovery is do you have this problem? How you are experiencing it is a part kind of a qualification question. And then you handle that by saying, oh, well, we have a customer who had exactly the same experience or very similar experience to you. And I'd love to show you how we solved that for them. Let's set up a demo for next Tuesday. The goal is always, let me at least set up a demo for you next Tuesday, or whatever the equivalent is.
Yeah, if there's no call in the calendar next, then it dropped out of pipeline. You have to agree to a call. Otherwise, there's no next step, no customer, no prospect. No,
that's right.
Basically, that's pretty much it. But I mean, to the point that you were saying, I mean, these are really great things when we have to address, these like internal things, product, pipeline, prospects, these kind of things. However, we're also speaking a little bit about, what happens when external circumstances get in the way. New competitor example, like I think in Nokia, the Nokia phones or something like that.
Sure.
And then like there's stuff that will happen. There could be, I think, like recession. We had a pandemic, for example, that changed a lot of things. .com boom, economic recessions, this, that, and the other. And when Nokia were there, did they do anything when Apple came out with a new product with all these cool new features or something like that, and they have a cool brand? Well, yeah. I mean, same thing Kodak we can look at, Kodak invented the digital camera, yet at the same time failed to do anything about it. And then,
So those are really interesting situations that are kind of different from this getting to a repeatable sales model challenge. Nokia was like the biggest company in the world at the time when Apple didn't really take it down. Nokia was and allowed itself to die, basically. It didn't respond well. Totally a very different question. What's interesting, I was working with Nokia a lot at that time because they were a customer of my product management product.
Oh, so it's your fault now.
It was my fault. Well, we came in a little bit late, and the problem is that's a very different kind of set of problems because they were so successful in their existing legacy market that they had they really had more of the innovator's dilemma kind of problem. They were so successful in their current market, and switching to real smartphones, which they were trying to do, but in a slow way, would have been the way they saw it, really detrimental to their business, that it was really hard for them to make that shift fast enough. Because they had all the technology. They had touch screens. They had everything like that. They didn't have, and then that's a situation also where Apple's competitive advantage was really incredible design and having a guy named Steve who, Steve just was able to come up with these and shepherd the innovations in the right direction to make it amazing. And I don't think Nokia would have had a really hard time making an amazing solution like the iPhone. When the iPhone first came out, I remember picking up the first one and just being like, wow. And it barely did anything. And yet it was still like this experience was so amazing. And Nokia just wasn't in a position to do that. Partly because they were super mature as well. They could not, in their mind, release a phone that wasn't complete. Whereas iPhone, the first iPhone, there was no app store, there was no copy and paste in the first iPhone. It was really
basic. Yeah,
it was very basic. It was really a sub 1.0 release. It was a version 0.9 release, really.
Yeah.
And Nokia could not, because of the type of business, it could not release a 0.9 offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So,
on the one hand, I do want to say
I was there.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. The downfall of Nokia. You can make a Netflix series about that from your experience,
Yeah.
Yeah. But like on the one hand, I do want to say something like I'm kind of like between two words. But on the one hand, I want to say dare to be disruptive. It sounds catchy. At the same time, I think like innovating for the sake of innovation, I don't know. It's like
there has to be a problem that you're solving with the innovation. I mean, and it may be that you say, I've created this technology, let me go find the problem that it solves, and that's legit. But if you just create the technology and put it out there and hope that somebody will figure out what to do with it, that's what Google does all the time, right? Google Glass is exactly that. Amazing technology, but they put it out there and said, you figure out what to do with it. And in my opinion, this is a big failure. They should have come out and said, okay, amazing technology. Here's one thing that it is really, really good at, and we're going to sell it for $10,000 to people that have that exact problem. And oh, by the way, everybody else can use it and do whatever they want with it. That would have been way more successful. It would still exist, and it would be like version 4 now or version 10.
Yeah.
Google makes this mistake all the time. They release technology, but without saying, here's the exact use case that this is the only or the best solution for. And they try to let people figure it out, and they fail. And then they have to kill that product.
So yeah, but again, coming near the end of time, we've spoken a lot. It keeps coming back to the problem orientation. So anyone who wants to throw out a final question who's watching this, feel free to comment below. But until then, I have another question. We have spoken a lot about the problem orientation, focusing on the prospects' problems, their pains. What about what they want, their gains, their outcomes? Because that's, I believe, just as important, but sometimes overlooked by both product and salespeople, like their dream state, we could call it.
Yeah. I love it. I do think that part of, and I don't really talk about it in my minimum viable product knowledge because I see that as addressing a more significant problem, but the being able to paint the picture of the promised land, right? What is life going to be like? But again, you have to go back to the problem, because it's like the promised land is not, oh, sales goes up by 10%. That's kind of boring. It's important. It's boring. The promised land is you're going to get a promotion because you enabled sales to go up by 10%.
Exactly.
Or the team that you thought you were going to have to lay off, you don't have to lay off, and you can actually grow because sales went up by 10%.
Exactly. That is getting down into that really the emotions, which is, it may take, but again, it could be anywhere from like minutes to hours, or who knows how long it will take to open up about what they really want. And sometimes we have to like kind of foresee that. That's when we have a lot of customers. If you have like, 100, 200 customers, you've done 100, 200 calls with potential customers, you really get in your ICP, those percentages, you get an understanding of their kind of wants and needs, and it's kind of translatable.
And if during discovery you're finding the symptoms of the problem, can't get home to the kids' baseball game, then the promised land is you're going to get home, you're going to be done by 4 o'clock every Thursday because the TPS reports no longer take 8 hours.
Exactly. You get to spend more time with your kids because that's what they want. You get to see your kids,
That's right.
and we can relate that to the more personal stories, like saying, oh, my dad or this person that they want there for them, to open up a bit more. But it's so emotional. I love diving into the emotions. And
I think good salespeople do this naturally.
Yeah.
And so I want to help all, or let me say this differently. Great salespeople do this naturally.
Yeah.
Good salespeople could do it if they got help, meaning if they got the questions, if they got the information that product has often, because we did discovery. We know what the problems are. We know what the symptoms are. We know what the pains are. Let's communicate those to sales and marketing so they can use them to get the right prospects into the funnel and then move the prospects through the funnel and paint the picture of the promised land, handle the objections, and build more, because if a prospect really needs what we have, but we fail to sell them because we didn't do the sales job right, that's a big failure on our part. It's not just a failure because we're not making quota. It's a failure because we're not helping improve great value in the world.
Yeah, and with that, I think everyone is responsible for that. No one problem is anyone's job. It's everyone's job.
There we go. Perfect.
I'm just gonna. It's been really quite cool. We've spoken about a lot of things. Anyone wants to hear from Nils, myself, either of us, and they can just DM us. I'm going to pop the details of both of us on LinkedIn in the chat. And whilst I do that, Nils, is there any final words of wisdom that you would say yourself? You would say yourself about.
Yeah, so I think a lot of times you can diagnose whether the things that I've been talking about are the problems. There's two places. One is the demo. Is the demo features and functions, or does it focus on the prospect's problems? A great diagnostic. And it's shocking how many demos are features and functions. And then another one is going into the sales call. If you're a product manager in particular, going into a sales call and listening for how many times the salesperson answers a question with a made-up answer. That's a failure of product management if they have to answer a question with something they made up. And it's an opportunity for fixing it. And my belief is there's almost always a lot of opportunity to improve sales with no product changes, just by simply improving the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been quite a lot that we've gone through, and it's given people a lot of food for thought, I hope, and I hope they walk away with that if they want. And then that's Nils' details over there. Hit him up on LinkedIn.
Hit me up.
Hit Nils up on LinkedIn. Hit myself up as well, or just choose to hit both of us up. And we're happy to tag team it, see how product and sales can align. So I just want to thank you for your time, and everyone watching this. Be seeing you in a couple of weeks after the Easter break. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great to talk with you, Alex. Loved it.
Great, Nils.